We like to all show up in our yellow t-shirt. We wear them sometimes at Pride. We wear them when we go to city council meetings or school board meetings. Anytime like we gather together to say, hey, we're here, we're showing up in our, with our UU values to support something or ask for support for something. So make sure you get your yellow t-shirt if you don't have one already. Oh, and the cost is for children, $11, and for adults, $15. No, $10 for child sizes, $15 for adult sizes. They cost $11 and $14, so we're just asking for a little bit. They cost $11 and $14, so we're just asking for a little bit more to help defray the costs. Is that right, Jeanette? But she wants me to say we want everyone to have a shirt that wants one, and for families, buying multiple shirts can get expensive. So if you can't afford one, let Jeanette know, and she will help you out with that. Okay, one last announcement. January 27th, that's a Friday, we're having a goodbye party for Brandon. I won't cry, I probably will. But it's Friday night. I think we decided to start at 6 p.m. And because we want to make it as Brandon-esque as possible, it's going to be an 80s themed party. So we'll probably have some 80s themed karaoke. Wear your best 80s outfit. I know you all still have them in your closet, right? And join us in saying goodbye to Brandon. Thank you. Okay. I know I need to take a deep breath. I feel like I had too much caffeine today already. So breathe in with me. Breathe out. This month, we are journeying on a path of finding our center. But what does that mean? What is our center? How do we even know? Let us consider a few things that we might find at our centers. First, envision the center of yourself. Is there an actual physical place in your body that you feel is your center? Or is it a nebulous place in your mind or in your soul? Envision the center and ask yourself, what do you find? What centers you, or what do you center? Maybe it is your values. Maybe at your center is a moral compass asking you to pay attention to it as you journey through life. And maybe it is this Unitarian Universalist faith that helps you shape that center. My hope is that Unitarian Universalist values and theologies help to bring out all of the love and compassion that is at your center so that we may all join together and bring more of it to the world.
This Essential Work of Justice and Liberation for All by Rosemary Bray McNett. By no means are we, Unitarian Universalists, perfect. We often fail as much as we succeed. Yet even when we have broken our vows 1,000 times, we return to this essential work of justice and liberation for all. We do the work best when we remember that what church is and what it is not. Church is not a place to hide. It is not the place to get away from the world. It is not a place where we get to pretend that the lives we live and our particular situations are not terribly complex, often confusing, and sometimes depressing. Church is the place where we stand with one another, look the world in the eye, attempt to see clearly, and gather strength to face what we see with courage, and yes, with joy. Okay. In the tradition of our Unitarian Universalist faith, we will light our chalice. Please arise in body or spirit to join us in signing and singing Spirit of Life, hymn number 123, as Mary Saint Denis lights our chalice.
to invite our children or all those young at heart to come forward. Come on up, y'all. Yay. Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, today we are celebrating the Martin Luther King Jr. You all know who Martin Luther King Jr. is? Yeah, do you learn about him in school?
Once upon a time, there's a man named Martin
We're
Luther.
gonna learn some more. Okay, let's learn some more. Let's put on that video.
Once upon a time, there's a man named Martin Luther King Jr. It's funny to think about because now we know his name so well. But at one time, he was just a kid. Like maybe you're a kid watching this. Well, he was a kid too. Well, maybe you're a grown-up. That's okay too. Former kids are welcome here. I don't discriminate. Martin Luther King grew up to be a great man, of course. But things weren't all that great in the world while he was growing up. Not everybody was treated like they were somebody. And I believe that you should treat everybody like it's their birthday. But they didn't do that. People looked at the color of their skin. And that's how they decided if they were friends or not. Not cool, man. That didn't make him feel good. That didn't make anybody feel good. But his parents helped him grow up. He went to church. He learned about love. He grew up to be a minister to help a lot of people. He did all sorts of cool stuff. He helped a lot of people learn about love too. But still, he looked around and said, things should be better. He wanted to change things, so he did stuff. He decided, instead of spreading the hate, he would spread the love. He wanted to bring people together. Where people were hurting, he stepped in to help. He marched with them. He walked with them. He walked arm in arm with everyone. Sometimes it didn't go well, but he kept going. Sometimes he ended up in prison, but he kept going. Some people didn't like him, but he kept going. Some days were hard, but he kept going. Love does that, it just keeps going, even when things are dark. And, well, I don't like this part of the story, but things did get pretty dark. Someone who didn't agree with him shot him. He died in April 1968. Now, keep pressing it. Why are you telling us this sad story? Come on. I know. I'm sorry, but it happened. I don't like that happened. Now, I gotta tell you something. When things aren't awesome, it can be tough. And things won't always be awesome, but your response can be. Martin Luther King's response? It was awesome. Today, I just wanted us to think about this. Isn't it cool that we can change things? Like any of us, anybody. He dreamed and he changed things. And he dreamed and he kept sharing his dreams. They became not just his dream, a lot of people's dream. Like this one. I have a dream that little black boys and black girls will join hands with white boys and white girls and become sister and brothers. That's a pretty good dream. Let's dream like that. That could change things.
Do y'all have a dream? Making the world a better place? No. Not yet. You don't know. Maybe it's still forming in your mind and in your heart. Yeah. Well, like the King President said, love kept him going, right? Love was at his center, and it just kept him going even when times were tough. Well, love is at the center of Unitarian Universalism. You know that, right? Yeah. Okay, good. And so love keeps us going. As Unitarian Universalists, we've been working, in history, go back in history, you see that a lot of Unitarian Universalists worked to help abolish slavery, they helped in the civil rights movement, and we did have some ministers that got to know Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King. And in fact, he came to speak to Unitarian Universalists once. See, once a year, we have this thing called the General Assembly, where hundreds, even thousands of Unitarian Universalists from all over the country and even the world gather together. And they do this thing, it's called a Where lecture. It's where someone who's important and knows a lot about, what's going on in the world comes to speak. And in 1966, Martin Luther King Jr. came to speak to the Unitarian Universalists. And so that little bit of the history. Stations, you can see that speech that he gave. Stations, you can see that speech that he gave at our back table. Sarah, where we're going to make signs for the MLK parade. So that was something that we as Unitarian Universalists should know. So I am so glad that you joined us today. We're going to do some awesome things centered around love. So I hope that, I know you probably want to go back to the corner with Jerry, but you're going to stay with us today and do some awesome things, okay? Yeah, okay. Thank you. Well, before we begin all of that, we are going to sing a new hymn, right? This is a hymn that Adam found yesterday and said, hey, I kind of like this hymn. It's kind of cool. And so I said, well, come tell us why you like this hymn.
All right, cool. Oh, yeah, we actually have lyrics up here. Fantastic. That's great. Thank you very much for getting that done all at the last minute. All right. This is, if you got a gray hymnal, it's 150 in the teal, and I just thought it was worth a quick look-see before we actually get into it. It's a J.S. Bach harmony tune. Not that hard to sing if you like your classical music, but the words are tricky. This is written by the poet James Lowell, also Unitarian, and of course it's probably written pre-Civil War. And so it does rhyme, but you get all these words switched around. So I thought it was worthwhile to get through it. Now, back then, before the Civil War, I know this is true. It's probably a bit true today because we know what's going on politically. But there are people who say that because their parents were free, that there's this, what should I say, inheritance of freedom that comes to them. And they boast about it. But the question is, if there's anyone on earth who's a slave, are we truly free and brave? And the answer is no. Next slide, please. Thank you, folks, back in the back. Can you hit me again? He's working on it. They're working on it. Maybe. Okay, well, the next part is, if we do not feel the chain that's on someone else's body, that's on someone else's soul, are we not base slaves indeed? Slaves that are unwilling to be freed. Because what makes us free is freeing others with us. Second verse, is it true freedom just to break your own chains? And the answer is no. Are you going to forget about other people who are also suffering and in silence not go through the abuse, the hatred, the scoffing that people who fight for freedom are faced with? Are you going to say, hey, I'm free all by myself, that's good enough? And the answer is no. And then we get the third verse where it's not you're a slave because your parents were a slave, or you're a slave because you just happen to be chained up now. You're a slave if you fear to speak for the fallen and the weak. You can be walking around the street all day free as a bird, but if you are afraid to speak for people who are suffering, then maybe you're a slave. If you do not choose to actually go out there and fight for other people's freedom, then maybe you're a slave. So that's the thing to think about. All right, I'm going to play the tune for you. Let's see if we can get into this.
Okay. Let's see. Rise in body or spirit.
The tune goes like this.
always hymnals. I want to share with you these words from Octavia Butler. She wrote, "To shape God with wisdom and foresight, to benefit your world, your people, your life, consider consequences, minimize harm, ask questions, seek answers, learn, teach." This verse from Octavia Butler's Parable series encompasses how we will worship today. To worship means to hold up that which is of worth. And today we lift up considering the consequences of our actions, minimizing harm, asking questions, seeking answers, learning and teaching. We do these things to carry on the vision of the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Although it has been over 50 years since Dr. King dared to have a dream, we are still working to make it a reality. Dr. King spoke not just about ending desegregation, but about getting to the root of racism in our American culture, our systems, our institutions, our laws, and yes, our hearts. We are still working on this monumental task today, as there are always those who choose to hide behind the curtain of denial and tell us the work has already been done. To deny that racism still exists is to keep us separated from each other. To deny the experiences and reality of those who are oppressed leaves us complacent to the sins of disconnection. To deny the truth of history does nothing to untangle a web of lies and nothing to lead us towards a web of love. Our governor here in Florida threatens those of us who persist in the work of anti-racism. He states that Florida is the state where woke goes to die. The phrase "stay woke" emerged in the 1930s and referred to an awareness of the social and political issues affecting African Americans. To be woke, to me, means to be compassionate enough to want to do something to stop the suffering of others, knowing that none of us are free until all of us are free, and to get us closer to Dr. King's vision of the beloved community. The word woke has unfortunately been co-opted by our governor and the like, and is meant to insult us. To say it will die here in Florida sounds much like a threat. But let us not back down and let fear take over our compassionate hearts. Let us send the message loud and clear that compassion and justice and Dr. Martin Luther King's dream will not die here in Florida. So today, I'm inviting you on a journey that will help to wake up your compassionate heart and inspire you to action. As Cornel West says, justice is what love looks like in public. As a faith, Unitarian Universalists have love at their very center, but we know that it can't just sit there. It has to move, has to turn into action, and to show up for justice. So around this room, in this sanctuary, you will find 7 contemplation stations. They will ask you to consider the consequences of your actions, to learn how to minimize harm, to ask questions about yourself and about others, to seek answers through learning and through teaching. You can enter in anywhere you would like. You can spend as much time in any one of them as you would like. You don't even have to go to all of them or any of them. You can sit and observe if you like. Examine MLK's The Other America speech, and I have some statistics at which you can look and compare. We have a reflection table up here where you can reflect upon your own behavior and actions and how you are in the world and try to do better. It's also where the joys and sorrows is, and so you'll notice we didn't do that today, but you will be able to do it on your own. Let's see, this way, we have a place where you can make a bag for people without homes. There's toiletries and non-perishable goods. And then you can take it with you. Ken and Dorothy say, take it with you. Give it to someone in need as you encounter them along your journey. And also on the wall is just some information to read on why we're rephrasing our language around people without homes and not saying homeless people, but people without homes. And there's also a piece of paper you can take there to help remind you how to change your language and why. And then I have some information on some Black Unitarian Universalists in our history. That's back in that corner, so that's just sort of a reading and questioning place to be. Let's see. Oh, and then back in the Maker's Corner with Sarah, we're making the signs for the MLK parade, and I pulled some quotes from MLK's speech that he gave at the Ware Lecture for us to make signs with, and Sarah will help guide you in that because she's an artist and a sign maker. And over there we have some pictures of social justice endeavors that we've done before, and I'm asking people to sign up for a social justice committee meeting that I'm going to hold next week. And also there's some books left over from the book fair that you can buy, and you can pay Tom Bergen, correct? Tom, raise your hand. If you want to buy a book, see Tom. And then here we have the 25 traits of a beloved community. Because we say that word a lot, beloved community, but what does it mean? And so there's 25 traits to a beloved community, and also some quotes that I found from some folks to help us understand what it is. And what I want you to do is to pick one and then match it up with one of our 8 principles and see why it is that it relates to us putting our principles into action. So I will invite you to participate at these contemplation centers as you please. Please do so with care and thoughtfulness, curiosity, and an open mind. Ask questions, share with others. At about 11:50, I will call you back to your seats so that we can close our worship service with a prayer and a song. But don't worry, if you don't get everything, you can return after the service. I'll leave them all up. And in the background on the TVs, we will be playing the MLK speech from 1967 entitled The Other America. So you'll feel free to get up, to enter as you please, and to contemplate.
Dean Napier, Mr. Bell, members of the faculty and members of the student body of this great institution of learning, ladies and gentlemen. Now there are several things that one could talk about before such a large, concerned and enlightened audience. There are so many problems facing our nation and our world that one could just take off anywhere. But today I would like to talk mainly about the race problem, since I'll have to rush right out and go to New York to talk about Vietnam tomorrow, and I've been talking about it a great deal this week and weeks before that. But I'd like to use as a subject from which to speak this afternoon the other America. And I use this subject because there are literally 2 Americas. One America is beautiful for a situation. And in a sense, this America is overflowing with the milk of prosperity and the honey of opportunity. This America is the habitat of millions of people who have food and material necessities for their bodies, and culture and education for their minds, and freedom and human dignity for their spirits. In this America, millions of people experience every day the opportunity of having life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in all of their dimensions. And in this America, millions of young people grow up in the sunlight of opportunity. But tragically and unfortunately, there is another America. This other America has a daily ugliness about it that constantly transforms the buoyancy of hope into the fatigue of despair. In this America, millions of work-starved men walk the streets daily in search for jobs that do not exist. In this America, millions of people find themselves living in rat-infested, vermin-filled slums. In this America, people are poor by the millions, and they find themselves perishing on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. In a sense, the greatest tragedy of this other America is what it does to little children. Little children in this other America are forced to grow up with clouds of inferiority forming every day in their little mental skies. And as we look at this other America, we see it as an arena of blasted hopes and shattered dreams. Many people of various backgrounds live in this other America. Some are Mexican Americans, some are Puerto Ricans, some are Indians, some happen to be from other groups. Millions of them are Appalachian whites. Probably the largest group in this other America, in proportion to its size in the population, is the American Negro. The American Negro finds himself living in a triple ghetto, a ghetto of race, a ghetto of poverty, a ghetto is to deal with this problem of the two Americas. We are seeking to make America one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now let me say that the struggle for civil rights, or the struggle to make these two Americas one America, is much more difficult today than it was 5 or 10 years ago. For about a decade or maybe 12 years, we struggled all across the South in glorious struggles to get rid of legal, overt segregation and all of the humiliation that surrounded that system of segregation. In a sense, this was a struggle for decency. We could not go to a lunch counter in so many instances and get a hamburger or a cup of coffee. We could not make use of public accommodations. Public transportation was segregated, and often we had to sit in the back, and within transportation within cities, we often had to stand over empty seats because sections were reserved for whites only. We did not have the right to vote in so many areas of the South. And the struggle was to deal with these problems. Now, certainly they were difficult problems. They were humiliating conditions. By the thousands, we protested these conditions. We made it clear that it was ultimately more honorable to accept jail cell experiences than to accept segregation and humiliation. By the thousands, students and adults decided to sit in at segregated lunch counters to protest conditions there. And when they were sitting at those lunch counters, they were in reality standing up for the best in the American dream and seeking to take the whole nation back to those great wells of democracy which were dug deep by the founding fathers in the formulation of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. Many things were gained as a result of these years of struggle. In 1964, the Civil Rights Bill came into being after the Birmingham movement, which did a great deal to subpoena the conscience of a large segment of the nation to appear before the judgment seat of morality on the whole question of civil rights. After the Selma movement in 1965, we were able to get a voting rights bill. Now, all of these things represented strides, but we must see that the struggle today is much more difficult. It's more difficult today because we are struggling now for genuine equality. And it's much easier to integrate a lunch counter than it is to guarantee a livable income and a good, solid job. It's much easier to guarantee the right to vote than it is to guarantee the right to live in sanitary, decent housing conditions. It is much easier to integrate a public park than it is to make genuine, quality, integrated education a reality. And so today we are struggling for something which says we demand genuine equality. It's not merely a struggle against extremist behavior toward Negroes. And I'm convinced that many of the very people who supported us in the struggle in the South are not willing to go all the way now. I came to see this in a very difficult and painful way in Chicago over the last year where I've lived and worked. Some of the people who came quickly to march with us in Selma and Birmingham were active around Chicago. And I came to see that so many people who supported morally and even financially what we were doing in Birmingham and Selma were really outraged against the extremist behavior of Bull Connor and Jim Clark toward Negroes rather than believing in genuine equality for Negroes. And I think this is what we've got to see now, and this is what makes the struggle much more difficult. And so as a result of all of this, we see many problems existing today that are growing more difficult. It's something that is often overlooked, but Negroes generally live in worse slums today than 20 or 25 years ago. In the North, schools are more segregated today than they were in 1954 when the Supreme Court's decision on desegregation was rendered. Economically, the Negro is worse off today than he was 15 and 20 years ago. And so the unemployment rate among whites at one time was about the same as the unemployment rate among Negroes. But today the unemployment rate among Negroes is twice that of whites. And the average income of the Negro is today 50% less than whites. And as we look at these problems, we see them growing and developing every day. We see the fact that the Negro economically is facing a depression in his everyday life that is more staggering than the depression of the 30s. The unemployment rate of the nation as a whole is about 4%. Statistics would say from the Labor Department that among Negroes it's about 8.4%. But these are the persons who are in the labor market, who still go to employment agencies to seek jobs, and so they can be calculated. The statistics can be gotten because they are still somehow in the labor market. But there are hundreds of thousands of Negroes who have given up. They've lost hope. They've come to feel that life is a long and desolate corridor for them with no exit sign. And so they no longer go to look for a job. There are those who would estimate that these persons who are called the discouraged persons would be 6 or 7% in the Negro community. And that means that unemployment among Negroes may well be 16%. And among Negro youth in some of our large urban areas, it goes to 30 and 40%. And so you can see what I mean when I say that in the Negro community, that is a major, tragic, and staggering depression that we face in our everyday lives. Now, the other thing that we've got to come to see now that many of us didn't see too well during the last 10 years, and that is that racism is still alive in American society and much more widespread than we realize. And we must see racism for what it is. It is a myth of the superior and the inferior race. It is the false and tragic notion that one particular group, one particular race is responsible for all of the progress, all of the insight, and the total flow of history. And the theory that another group or another race is totally depraved, innately impure, and innately inferior. In the final analysis, racism is evil because its ultimate logic is genocide. Hitler was a sick and tragic man who carried racism to its logical conclusion. And he ended up leading a nation to the point of killing about 6 million Jews. And this is the tragedy of racism because its ultimate logic is genocide. If one says that I am not good enough to live next door to him, if one says that I am not good enough to eat at a lunch counter, or to have a good, decent job, or to go to school with him, merely because of my race, he is saying consciously or unconsciously that I do not deserve to exist. To use a philosophical analogy here, racism is not based on some empirical...
We have now come upon the moment when we share our treasures with this community. When we each give what we can, we open ourselves up to possibilities. We open ourselves up to discovering the truth and the abundance of the center of this community. The money that you are able to give helps to sustain this church. Its programs like worship, Wednesday nights, and religious exploration for our children. Our beautiful buildings and grounds, and the people that make it all happen. It is all possible only because we give in the ways that we can. The ushers will now pass the plates, but please know that you can also give on our PayPal link.
I just want to say thank you to all of you for participating today. It really warms my heart to see you all engaged in the meditation or reflection, contemplation stations. It's a different way of worshiping, I know, but sometimes I like to do things different and, of course, be able to bring our children into different ways of worshiping and to allow for them to be with you and learn what it means to be a Unitarian Universalist. So thank you all. My closing words, well, they're a prayer. It's a closing prayer called Peacemakers of a New World, and it was written by the Reverend Audette Fulbright Folsom, who's the minister at All Souls UU Church in New York City. Holy Spirit, God of ages and so many names, we gather once again to rejoice in the light offered to the world by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. His walk on this earth was a gift to generations, and today we give thanks for that gift. We know that we are called together today not simply to rejoice and be glad that such a man was given to us for a time, but rather to heed the calls he made to us, the same calls that reverberate now as they did when he was alive. The same calls you have made time and time again in a voice of justice that calls us throughout the ages. We are called to hear the same word of truth that Dr. King spoke, that the hungry and poor are still with us. It is not enough to march and remember. The work we are called to do is to feed hungry children and to wipe the tears from our siblings' eyes. It is not enough to sing a joyful song. We must also build the houses that will give shelter to every adult and child and allow them full security and dignity. We are called today to remember that we are not to judge one another by the color of our skins, but by the content of our character. In a world where our families are knit ever more tightly together past old ideas of color and race, we know that the tyranny of fear and hatred still exists in our hearts. We know that racism still lurks like a viper around unexpected corners. And so we gather again to renew our promise to one another that we will be vigilant. We will be warriors and peacemakers of the world. A world that is always dawning, the kingdom of God, which is always at hand among people who work and pray and give thanks together. Holy Spirit, on this day of remembrance, we do give thanks, and we are joyful that for a time we had our brother and father, our pastor and leader, Dr. King, with us. But we do not forget that the mantle he wore for a time has been passed now to us, to each of us here gathered. And it is in our efforts, in our faithful struggle, and in our generous witness to a better world becoming that we make our most powerful prayer of thanksgiving. Thank you, gracious one, for this day and for all our many gifts in a spirit of remembrance and a spirit of gratitude and hope. We set forth once again with your guidance and strength to make the world anew. Amen. Will you please extinguish our chalice?
Please join me as we extinguish the chalice. We extinguish this chalice but not the light of truth, the warmth of love, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts and out into the world. Alright. Please rise and embody your spirit and sing with us from your teal hymnal or the words on the screen, hymn number 1051, We Are.
1051, We Are. Tune sounds like this.